whenever I felt like I'm not going to say that. When I knew that God was telling me that the next step for me was to come in to 2K2, it was really hard because I knew that I was going to have to leave them. And that sucked. Like that was really hard. But being where I am now, like I know that this is the right spot and the right thing, but it doesn't mean that it's not still really hard, if that makes sense. Like it is still hard. But is it worth it every time? Every time.
Yeah. So
sorry, I'm crying. I'm just being myself.
Well, you've taken me in a different direction than I thought we were going to go, but I think we're still getting where we need to be. So you described a scene when you sat down with LB and you'd started at University City, and he kind of guided you in how to execute your role. What did that look like?
Okay, so whenever I'm very strategic is my number 2 strength on Strength Finders. And so like being able to find holes and like, oh, this is like an issue and this is like going to be like, this is going to be a problem. So like, how can we solve it? How can we fix it? And so I had found, in particularly, like I oversee our EHQ team. And so there's just like a lot of dysfunction in how, in just efficiency really, like a lot of things were just really inefficient. And so I was like, I think that I need to come in and like, these are the things that I need to change. This is what I want to change. These are the conversations I need to have. And I was like, I'm so great because I've been so proactive, right, LB? Like I've thought all of this out. And then he just said, he was like, yeah, you're not going to do any of that. What you need to do is you just need to sit and you need to lead opposite than you ever have before. And so for me, it was like with the youth, what do? Like you fight with them. Like you make the change happen because you can, because you're older and like this is what you do, right? And it was like, no, you need to lead differently than you ever have before, aka you're not looking for a short-term result, like you need to think long-term and where it's going to go. And so I just sat back and instead got to know people and learned the system and learned actually what was going on. And I should say this, why it had been the way that it was and why it had happened. And so learning this full on background of like how we got to this point that is still dysfunctional.
And so the whole time, it's been 5 months,
mm-hmm.
the whole time your strategic brain just kind of like gave you permission. You didn't like, you weren't thinking about anything or noticing any flaws. You weren't like building plans. You were just kind of patiently observing.
Oh, I've made all of the plans. They're all in my head. It's all still there. But it's just been okay, instead of like, we're going to accomplish and fix all of this by May. It's like, no, hopefully we'll be there by December. Like, and so it's just long term.
Yeah. So like those plans, they're like, I'm coming up with an analogy. Give me a second. They're like ammunition on the shelf for a gun that's loaded with different bullets.
Yep.
Or they are like pit bulls in a cage.
No, they're definitely like just on the shelf, just waiting. I wouldn't say a gun with ammunition as much as it's like, oh, you're hungry? I already have this whole thing just ready for you.
So
it's going to be
meals
great.
that have been prepped.
Yep.
Okay. You didn't like the ammunition thing, so I was trying to shift.
No. Yeah.
And so the tension that, because you and I were talking through, now we're 5 months in, you've been patient, you've prepped meals, some of them have spoiled and gone bad, you have to throw them out. You know, you've got all this stuff that you've been working on, but you feel hindered in your ability to distribute it at this point. And the kind of person, here's where it comes together for me, the kind of person that drives back at 3 a.m. from the beach just because and organizes your life around a 9-to-5 schedule so that you can do the thing that you're passionate about has, at a certain point, 5 months into your role, found yourself having to bottle up the passion, put it on the shelf, and and execute the role that's expected.
Mm-hmm.
And you're kind of at this place where, is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? And I want you to speak to what it feels like to be in that position, and maybe your hunch on whether it's time yet. Does that make sense? Like,
Mm-hmm.
Are you following what I'm trying to dig at?
I think so.
We'll talk about it, and I'll ask another question if I feel like we're going the wrong way.
Okay.
Wait, hold on. Do I still feel like Anderson Cooper, or do I feel like John right now? Huh? This feels me? Okay.
Ask the question one more time. Just
So,
to make sure I understand.
well, it's not a question as much as it's a tension.
Mm-hmm.
So the tension
Explain the
is
tension.
you are beamer. You always have been.
Yes.
And the kind of beamer that we took notice of, who was driving back from 3 a.m. to pick up kids who have now all been baptized, that passion is why you're here.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's the thing that you've had to put on the shelf in a way.
Yeah.
In this season. And so now here we are 5 months in, and the tension is the whole 5 months. It's not like you've been like, it's okay. I'll just check all that there. It's fine. I'll just not be me for the next 5 months until the time is right, and then I'll be me again. You've been you the whole time, and so there's been a wrestling match going on.
Yes.
I defined that wrestling match as, is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet?
Hands down.
So,
Yeah, for sure.
So my thought is, what has it been like to live in your skin over the last 5 months, and how would you answer currently that question of, is it time yet?
So, trying to think how to say this, so please work with me here because I'm a verbal processor, so I'm just going to talk. I think, hi, Maddie. I think for me, I keep going back to this place of I thought that it looked a certain way. And I thought that God would use me. Why would he not use me in this lane and with young people? And why not? Why would you not? I'm so good at it. And I love it so much. And I love you so much. And this is where it's at. And so the tension at first was devastating of oh my gosh, how am I going to make an impact if I'm not working with young people or in this one lane? And for you, it looks for that one thing, whatever it is. But what I'm realizing is that I had put a lid on my leadership and what I believed about myself and viewing myself too small. And so I feel what the Lord is really revealing to me is myself. And it's I've so much for you and so much that you are capable of. And so being able to lead people that are older than me and recognizing that it's I carry more influence than I thought that I did with people in situations that I can't speak to because I've never lived it, but I can be empathetic towards. Does that answer the question?
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's great.
What did you hear her say, Esther? Just in your own words, you don't need to.
Basically that we view ourselves going down this path, and I 100% relate to it. We see ourselves going down this path and believing that this is where we make an impact. Where really it's God's sure that could be one avenue, but I have so much more for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you just take yourself out of this spectrum of this is my life, I'm also doing this thing.
Right.
And so what I'm hearing is don't limit or pigeonhole yourself to it's just this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But be able to step back and say, look, God has a lot for me, and I have a lot of influence in different areas that I have to realize because I only see myself in this one area.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. Awesome. So continue with is it time yet?
Is it time yet? I feel that is just a theme of my life. I'm I'm ready. And then I get there and I'm I'm still ready. This isn't enough. What is happening? And so I just don't know if that's ever really going to go away.
Yeah.
But because that's there, it's always that motivating factor because there's always more. And it's not that this isn't enough. There is a contentment in this. It's not, please don't hear me say that. It's this is incredible. and I love this and I love these people so much. And like being able to, I don't think that there's a greater honor than being considered a safe place for someone. There's just not.
And your someone has expanded in the last 5 months too.
Oh my gosh. I had no idea. No idea. It's crazy. Like some of my coordinators, I was telling John this morning, but I have this one coordinator, he's in his 50s, and it's like he's married with kids that are my age and older. And I'm like, I'm a trusted place for this man. I just never considered that for myself. I'm like the 12-year-old little boy that I was picking up for church. Absolutely. But this grown man who is still in ways like that can relate to this 12-year-old boy, I'm like, I just never considered it.
And so answering the question, is it time? How do you respond to that currently?
Is it time? I don't know how to respond to it.
But you did an excellent job of describing the tension, which is every time I get to the next place, there's always more. In other words, I felt like what I heard you say, you didn't say these words, but what I heard you expressing is that it never seems to be time. Is that right?
Yes.
So how do you answer the question then? Is it time yet?
Is it time yet? It's like it is and it's not.
Okay, there's a good tension. How would you, as a room, just opening up the discussion to be a group interview now, how, as you in a room, hearing story as it's unfolded to get it to this place, how do you answer for Beamer? Is it time yet?
I think it's good time. Like, just because you can look back and see where you couldn't see, but yet it's still happening and you were still using it to the best of your ability, I think it is a time that you didn't view as like, oh yeah, you know, you were in the time, but you didn't see what it was. Because you were still looking for, hey, is it this? Is it this? I'm ready. What's next? But
Yeah.
I think you had it. I think you do have it in the moment. So it was cool. It sucks when you can't see it in the moment. So.
Yeah.
I was going to actually say, I think that maybe not asking a question, but maybe just believing that it's never not time, is maybe an approach that you've had that you're not aware of. That, yeah, it looks different, but like instead of like wondering, oh, is it like, is there a permission here? I was just saying like, well, I made you this way, so the answer is yes. Like, because I made you this way, so the answer is yes. So it's never not time. Whatever you're doing, even if you're up here, you can still create a safe place in this room for everybody. Or if you're in the HQ, talking to the first lady handing you a plate, it's a safe place because you're creating it because that's who you are. So it's never not time.
Anything else? That's all great, by the way.
Yeah, I would say kind of going off what they were saying, but I feel like time is such a weird thing where we're like, oh, I feel like we're running out of time, or I feel like this day just doesn't have enough time, or this year went by so fast, yet it's going at the same rate all the time. So it's like when we say, is it time? It's like every time, this is just like kind of thinking, but every time is a time. So it's like when you're asking yourself, is it time? Kind of like going what you were saying, it's like, that is the time. But time is always moving, so it seems like I want more. There's more times kind of down the road.
It's very deep and philosophical. If you took your Cumberbatch glasses off, would it change?
Yeah, it probably wouldn't. Time.
It would have been more like, it would have been more like, are we done yet? Great. And yeah, Justin.
Just exactly, it feels like you are living like in this constant state of anticipation of what's next. And
Hands
so
down.
It's not like you're like trying to push past and get rid of the stuff that's on your plate, but more of like, I know that something's coming and I need to be prepared, so you're completely focusing on the moment so that you can be prepared for whatever is next. but it's kind of like having that in hand and.
And having something in the other hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So receiving and then having to like invest in that you need that somebody else do, right?
Yeah.
There's a role in improv that I think sums up
Like
what you were
improv acting.
saying. Yeah.
I was a theater major, random fact.
So you know it already.
So is Joe Lack.
So,
Joe Lack, yeah. I know him.
yeah, I just think of the yes and rule. And
Oh, mhm.
for improv to work, you have to play up to other people there. So
Yeah.
like you have to say yes to whatever they're saying.
It's always true.
But then you have to take what they say and make it something else too. So it's yes and that's what I hear when you're saying yes to the context you're in. And I have all this passion for all of this too. So how do we get there?
That's great.
I think that's great. And what I loved about I think the answer to the question is it time yet is what we were all saying. So it's for all of us. So I've asked Beamer to come in because I felt like, how many of you would agree that Beamer well, she is a great leader. I'm not going to give you the opportunity to say one way or the other. She's a great leader. She's learning to become even better. But how many of you would agree that she's somebody who feels easy to trust? Right? Trustworthiness is it feels like a soft characteristic, right? Like, how do you know if somebody's trustworthy or not? I don't know. You just kind of can tell. But can you really? Right? Isn't trustworthiness managing your schedule around a commitment and an expectation that I'm going to be there for you, 12-year-old kid that we don't know but's texting you a year later, whoever that was. You see what I'm saying? Isn't trustworthiness about being consistent, having routines, having patterns? Isn't trustworthiness ultimately simple decisions that we make daily in and out, to do things in such a way that we become predictable in certain ways, we become reliable in certain ways? You see what I'm saying? Trustworthiness is not so soft. It's pretty concrete. Your choice to be vulnerable in situations where many people choose to protect themselves and put up these invisible barriers, right? That is a decision that Beamer makes regularly to put herself out there. And, whether the boxes are falling over or she's choosing to pray in a moment that others would typically have just packed up and gone home, those are all choices that she's making to be vulnerable and to be present. And I think why I felt encouraged to say, hey, would you come in and allow me to interview you, is because what I would like to present today is not so much like a teaching on here's 7 principles you need to now go memorize about leadership. I think leadership flows out of us based on who we are and based on our willingness to become a trustworthy person, and based on our passion and commitment. Leadership leadership for me is not like anything that you do or say or how you make, how you lead a meeting. It's not so much like that. Is anybody behind you? You see what I'm saying? Like, it's just practical. If nobody is coming to you and asking for direction or wisdom or advice or counsel or friendship or encouragement, if nobody is there with you when you're saying, I need help, then you're not leading, right? So what causes you to become the kind of person that people are present, right? People are there, they're behind you, they're with you. Well, I think Beamer for me this morning represented a great example of that, and so the tension of it is helpful in the sense that it's never not the right time. I like the way you said that. Another way to say it is it time yet? If you're constantly wondering if it's time yet, you'll never notice that it's time now, right? Whatever, however you want to say it. Pastor said recently in the staff rally that you'll never get to there. There is always here. When you get there, there is now here. And if you're always pursuing the there, you're never going to embrace the here. You only ever get here. You see what I'm saying? You only ever get right now, which is I think what Benedict was talking about over here. You only ever get now. And a year ago, your now looked very different.
Oh, yeah.
Than today.
Absolutely.
But who you are has been consistent. You see what I'm saying? So the parts of us and the parts of Beamer and the parts of me, the parts of us that don't show up today for the assignment we've been given today are either stuck and lost in yesterday, right? In regret or in grief or remorse or whatever it is, we're either stuck back there or we're caught up in the next. You see what I'm saying? And for me, one of the greatest attributes of great leaders, the people that I love to follow, is they have found a way to steal back the energy that they are dispersing back there and out there, steal back that energy to right now. You see what I'm saying? And to redistribute all of that stuff to the opportunity that's in front of me. So we were talking, I won't share any of the details, but we were talking about a current situation that Beamer's facing. And I think there's always a tension of feeling like I don't have what I need. I don't have the current answers. I don't have, the right technique. I don't have whatever. I think we all feel that way in the moment. The reality is what we do have is who we are, right? Mm-hmm. What we do have is what God has made us to be. And that is, I don't think God accidentally puts us in situations, is what I'm trying to say. I think we can trust that if we are in the situation, then God intended us to be there. So the more of who we are that we can bring to that moment, the better off that moment will be. Does that make any sense? What final comments, Beamer, would you like to make before I reward you with a Snickers bar that you can either eat or distribute
Okay.
for your investment of time?
Thank you. Just as John was talking about this concept of trust, it reminded me of one of my one of my mentors. She always says, she would say this to me all the time. She'd say, God only asks two things from us, and that's to trust him and obey him. Yeah. And I wrestled with that because it was like, no, he doesn't. Like, he says the first and greatest commandment is to love the Lord God with all your heart, mind, and soul. So, like, that's not trust. But what I've realized, though, is just like how true that for me that is, in the sense of like, I can love someone and not trust them. And so it's like, how can I be a person that people trust, even though they may not love me all the time? They know that, like, I can still trust her, even though I don't love her or I'm mad or whatever the case may be. So that's all I got.
Good. Any questions for Beamer before I'm really just trying to withhold the Snickers.
Not to withhold the Snickers, but I think my question, making a hard right, is how did you, in your position in 2K2 of like knowing your place, how did you walk in more confidence or like understand your weight and responsibility once you transitioned on to being staff, without being like, oh, well, I'm still gonna hold back, I'm still gonna.
If I'm understanding you correctly, for me, when I think Jeff Bastis came and done this teaching for you guys, but he did the talking about your calling and about how it's like you don't wait for the title, like if you're called, you're just called. And I was like, oh, totally, I get it. And so I just really lived in that place of like, and something that I tell myself all the time is like, if the Lord has it for me, then I'm going to have it. Like nothing's going to stop it from happening. And everything that he gives me is for my freedom and not my harm. And everything that he takes away is for my freedom and not my harm. And so walking in this confidence of, okay, cool, University City Guest Experience Director, then I'm not going to compare myself and be like the best guest experience director at our church, but I am going to be the best guest experience director and best leader for these people that I'm leading because you called me to it. And I'm going to steward them as well as I can. And if LB's telling me to lead differently than I ever have, then I'm going to pray about that. And Lord, I'm going to seek you and find you in it because that's what these people need in this moment. And so how can I be pliable and adaptable? Because there are people looking to me who are going to be looking to you, that are looking to you now. And it's like God is too strategic, like he placed you there. So.
Is that helpful? You got what you needed? Any other questions?
Give it a Snickers.
Any other questions?
I guess, I think where my mind kind of stuck is like, when you transition from youth to guest experience,
Uh-huh.
and your passion is youth, you might have already touched on this, and I wasn't paying attention, but like, how did you adapt? How did you because in my mind I'm thinking, okay, Beamer had to suppress her passion for you to embrace this guest experience.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I wouldn't say, there might be moments where it feels like I'm suppressing it. I'm not going to pretend like that tension isn't there, but it's more of how can I, if I'm a passionate person, I'm just a passionate person. It doesn't have to necessarily be, you just rechannel it. And so it's the same way that I loved my kids at Uptown and how present I was for them. Now I'm just present for my coordinators. Now I champion them. And it's we can't underestimate celebrating people. And so it's I just celebrate them and I'm just present with them. And so it's if God has called me, and I believe that he has, to be here in this season, then it's because my identity isn't in youth and what I'm capable of doing with youth. My identity is in Christ and what he's called me to. And right now it's this. So it's just rechanneling it and doing the same thing. It just looks completely different.
To say it in a different way, maybe you're discovering that being a free, healthy, and passionate daughter to this 55-year-old guy in EHQ has the same level of possibility and fulfillment as being a free, healthy, and passionate mom to that 12-year-old kid at Uptown.
Yep.
Right? You get to be the same person, you're just in a different position.
Exactly.
Different role and different connection and relationship. But I love that, and that's part of what I loved about her story. I'm glad you asked that question, because what I love about Beamer's story as it's unfolding right now in this season of her experience and journey is that she's having to reapply herself, not redefine herself, reapply herself in a new set of circumstances. But she gets to be the same Beamer, and I've known her now in 3 different phases, if I can include the interviewing process, preview and all of that, before I really knew you that well. I knew your reputation. And then I got to know you in 2K2 and got to know you a little bit more personally in that season, in a submitted season. And now I'm hearing more about this next phase of you've been released to go do it, but in a way that was different than you expected. But I've had the privilege of now getting to see Beamer in 3 completely different scenarios as the same person. You see what I'm saying? And there's been a struggle for maybe in all 3 situations, because if I superimpose the 9 to 5 job was a thing you had to get around to do what you were passionate about in the season 1. The submission and not being released to do what you felt like you wanted to do was the barrier you had to navigate around in 2K2. And the fact that you're now having to love a 55-year-old guy instead of a 12-year-old kid that you feel like you better easier relate to is a barrier that you're having to navigate now, and probably other things as well. But you have been the same person consistently from my vantage point in all 3 seasons.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And the integrity and character that it takes to be that is much more messy and complex in the moment than it seems like it should be. But it's worth it. I mean, it is worth it. It's 100% worth it. And so navigating that personal struggle and unearthing that discovery process is why I felt like I needed to have you come in at the beginning. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Bye, everyone.
So maybe you picked up on it already, but I wanted to talk to you about leadership today. And how many of you have read a good book on leadership? And if you've had my experience, well, let me ask it differently. What is something that you learned from said book? Wow, where'd everyone go? I didn't know about them. Should we make them do push-ups or something?
Yes.
I mean, their bladder will be empty, right? So that'll be nice.
Yeah.
No, we won't humiliate anybody right now. What is the one thing that you learned from said book?
I can't name the book, so I'm also not really a big great for names, but I learned one principle of leadership that changed my life, which was that the sign of a good leader is that the people that follow him can do what he was doing better, and then the more successful, so to speak. It's usually a testament to like the mentorship and like the way that leader helped those people that were below him.
That's cool. What else? Yeah.
In Courageous Leadership by Bill Hybels, one of his things was like self-leadership and how important that is. And if you're not leading yourself well, then you can't lead others well.
Awesome. Yeah.
I was reading Divine Direction by Pastor Craig Rochelle, and one of the things that he said that really struck with me was setting like one goal. Like so many of us would try to set like multiple goals, especially for me. I'm the kind of person that puts like 25 goals, and I was like, I'm gonna accomplish all of these in 50 days. And so he was just kind of like, just pick one thing, not even necessarily like, for instance, like eating healthy. Like, okay, just cut out one thing that's healthy instead of, and just breaking it down to give yourself wins so you can track your wins. It's kind of like what Pastor said in the Staff Valley rolled out, but like having a scorecard, because then that gives you the motivation to like have more wins in the future and eventually build on yourself. So that was good.
That's great. What were we gonna say, Kate?
I can't remember the name of the book either, but it was a bright yellow cover. I can remember that. But it just talked about how it was a real kind of aha moment for me, because I realized that a lot of the way I lead was based on position. And it was talking about how if you're a real leader, you'll be able to influence people no matter what your position is, and people will come to you and like seek guidance from you, whether you have a position or not.
Right.
So it just challenged me to become the person that people look to for guidance, and develop those kind of relationships instead of relying on whether I have a position or not.
Right. That's great. What else? Anybody else? Yeah. Amber.
It's a book about Navy SEALs. It's called Extreme Ownership.
Yeah, I'm 2/3 of the way through it right now. Great book. Extreme ownership.
But he said in that, there's no such thing as a bad team being a bad leader. And like that was like you know what I mean? Because I think we can all complain like, well, if I had so and so on my team, or you know, if I had that coordinator, and it just like brought it down, like it's not real. It's about somebody what you have.
Yeah. So that's Leif Babin and Jocko Willink. And then Pastor Craig Rochelle, and we don't know, Bill Hybels. We don't know. So 2 pastors, 2 Navy SEAls.
Andy Stanley was mine. I don't remember the name of it though.
Andy Stanley. Yeah, so 3 pastors, 2 Navy SEAls. We've read Stephen Covey, Mormon, businessman, right? I'll tell you that John Maxwell boils leadership down to leadership is one thing. It's one thing and it's one thing alone. It's influence. That's his whole shtick. So everything that you're going to learn from John Maxwell is coming around to like the idea that leadership is about influencing others. I think there's a lot of value in understanding leadership in that light. But I don't think that Leif Babin and Jocko Willink would ultimately agree. I think ultimately they're going to say leadership comes down to results. But if you're, maybe not, I won't speak for them, but 2/3 of the way through their book, what they're presenting is if you're doing life and death work and half your team dies, that's your fault. You need to own that. You need to, you know what I mean? Because the results are ultimately what drive your ability to find the success or failure of your leadership. You see what I'm saying? So they're not going to say that. They haven't said that yet anyway in their book. But they're painting a picture where leadership is about the end result. Think about how different those 2 philosophies are. Same word, leadership, but think about how different it is to be a leader where everything is about the end result versus being a leader where everything is about influence. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Do we need to talk about that, or can you just imagine it and we can move on? Think about the difference between those 2 categories and what leadership looks like when you're a pastor, right? Where there's a higher ethic and a higher philosophy and a higher belief system and a higher power that you are ultimately submitted to. So Jesus said, I don't do anything that the Father didn't tell me to do. Leader, and pretty good leader that 2,000 years later, there's millions upon millions of people in nations all over the world who are following his teachings, right? Pretty good, pretty decent leader. Nelson Mandela is awesome, but in 2,000 years, let's check back and see if there are Mandelites. out there. He's awesome. I'm not taking anything away from his legacy, but Jesus is a pretty good leader. He's done some things that have kind of stood the test of time. And so Jesus' philosophy on leadership really probably boiled down to a word that doesn't seem to intuitively connect to leadership, but that would be submission. Right? Isn't that interesting? Yeah. So pastors have to lead in a context where maybe you could say submission and influence are kissing cousins in the concept of leadership, but submission and results, maybe not. So when I sat down, I felt the pressure that I needed to present a teaching on leadership. And so I was like, okay, where do I come at this? My initial response was, I'm going to steal John Maxwell's philosophy and I'm going to do teaching around influence. So I started doing all this research and I was like, well, wait a minute. Influencing somebody who's an authority over you is very different from influencing somebody who is submitted to you, because your position in leadership matters, right? So to Caleb's point, he learned a principle that was very valuable, which is I had accidentally been leading from a place of position, right? And so you're adapting that into your life. And I think it's an important lesson to learn within the context of leadership. So if some of you are going to be hired onto our staff, some of you are going to go on and do other things, but your position, wherever you end up, is going to affect your ability to influence, affect results, submit, whatever. It's going to affect all categories of your leadership. It's going to affect it. Position does. Right? Agreed? So leading yourself, leading others, leading up, leading from the middle, leading leaders. Those are all positions that you're going to find yourself in that affect how you lead, how you communicate, how you influence others. Talk to me about that for a second. Maybe experiences you had where you've been in a position that you found it very difficult to affect change, or where you've been in a position where it's easy to get results, but you found that maybe harder to earn respect. Anything? Yeah.
You said it can be harder as well.
Sure.
Well, I think when I did E-Kids at Gaston, it's everybody was older than me, and they all had kids, and I was like, I don't have kids, and I'm a child compared to these people. Kind of like what Beamer was talking about in terms of you never thought you'd get to the place where you could lead them at all, but it is kind of like what you said versus being a daughter versus being a mom, because it's I was similar to Beamer where it's I could lead kids all day long, and so I generally migrated toward my student volunteers, but my coordinators needed me, but they were double my needs. But that was a difficult tension that I faced.
Right.
Something I noticed just kind of early on in 2K2 was how a lot of the influence that I was able to lead from was borrowed influence, and that was because of the people above us had already built that rapport with the volunteers and coordinators. So just really recognizing that it is borrowed influence and it's okay to start there, but also I can't lean on that forever.
Right.
And to develop that kind of influence with those people.
Right. Yeah.
Parker has something he wants to say?
Parker.
I'm sorry,
Claude.
I was in the 21 Laws of Leadership. You guys can hear me? Can you guys hear me now?
What happened to that little microphone thing that Sam was using?
Yeah. Good job, Sam.
Right here.
Hello?
Just text it.
Stop. Say words.
Say something.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
In the 21 Laws of Leadership, one of the laws was people buy into the leader before they buy into the vision. And Matthew Drew, when I first got here to Morrisville, one of his tasks were for me to win over the campus as far as relationships. And he said that he found at Lake Norman that before people are going to buy into the vision, they need to buy into whoever's leading them first. He's basically saying It doesn't matter what kind of vision you're casting. It doesn't matter how great it is, how good it is. If they don't buy into you, then it doesn't matter what you're trying to share with them.
That's right.
And I saw that a little bit like in my first rotation at Rock Hill. Like once I started to gain like credibility with volunteers, then they were like willing to do more and stuff. So I realized that that's like, I saw it practical and like true in my like own life and leadership and stuff.
That's awesome. Thank you for contributing. Thank you for fighting through the unnatural barrier of being in a room in a different city. Share that wonderful insight. How many of you miss Claude?
Yeah.
Sam is the only one who didn't raise his hand. I don't know what that means for your relationship.
I don't miss him.
You don't.
Yeah.
You don't.
I get to see him every day.
How many of you are jealous of Sam is another question to ask. Yeah, I think that's right. And 21 Laws, that sounds like John Maxwell, is that right?
Yes, John Maxwell.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's the worst. He is the worst about like, here's 276 different ideas that I picked up from 47 different locations about leadership. And you're like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed. Can you give me 3? No, that's excellent. So people buy into the leader before they buy into the ideas and the vision. So your position, let's say it crassly, the white name badge doesn't make you a trusted person. That's the problem. Is it doesn't matter if you get the badge, whether that's here or somewhere else. It doesn't matter if you get the Movement Mortgage mug, if you get the Red Ventures knapsack. It doesn't matter that you have the position. You have to become the person that people are going to follow. And you can do that in any situation, right? So jumping to the bottom of my notes here, I read a book recently, last year, middle of the year sometime, called Super Bosses. And the premise of the book is that there are 3 major categories of the kinds of people who mentor well. And they're very different from each other. There is the iconoclast, and that would be somebody who is so passionate about their trade or their gift. So these could oftentimes be artists or musicians or videographers, producers, whatever. They're so passionate about their trade or their skill that others naturally follow them and want to learn from them because they set the standard. Iconoclasts. So like Miles Davis would be an iconoclast in the world of jazz because he was so passionate about jazz that John Coltrane was a part of his quintet for a while. John Coltrane went on to be also a very famous name in the world of jazz, and it was because he just hung around Miles Davis long enough that it all rubbed off and that he became himself an iconoclast in a sense, right? So that's one kind of mentorship. Miles Davis doesn't have to give a crap about you. All he has to do is love what he does so much that it spins off. So you got these celebrity chefs out there who are horrible people, just miserable people, but they are so good at what they do and they're so passionate about food that people flock to them and then celebrate when they finally get out from under their sharp knife and go do their own thing. But they can't deny the fact that they learned a lot in their tutelage. See what I'm saying? Iconoclast. A second category is glorious bastards. Glorious bastards are those people that want to win. They just want to win. And there's a certain kind of person who wants to be on a winning team. I don't care how you treat me. I just want to win. Yes, I will come to Duke. Right? So, Coach K, anybody? Duke fan? Yeah. Not a nice person, not really in any way, but a great coach. And so some people want to be pushed and want to win. And you can't deny, as much as you might hate them, you can't deny that Duke has had a relatively successful history as a basketball program, right? To stay in the sports analogy, football, professional, Seattle Seahawks. No.
Another coach.
Oh, Pete Carroll.
Pete Carroll, thank you. Gosh. Now I'm exhausted. Pete Carroll, not a glorious bastard, right? He would be the third category, nurturer. So 3 different kinds of leaders, all who can point to successful results, all very, very different in their styles. Which one do you think I am?
Nurturer.
Yep. The downside of being a nurturer is that you care too much. So sometimes restorative and individualization are my top 3, 2 of my top 5 strengths. What that means, one of the downsides, the basement of being an individual, individualization is one of my strengths, is that I will sometimes forfeit what's good for the group in order to give what's good for the person. Right? So I sacrifice what's best for the group on the altar of what's best for you. Now you love it, but the group suffers. That's what a nurturer is that's gonna be an Achilles heel. I like being a nurturer. I wouldn't want to be anything else. Maybe some of you think I'm a glorious bastard sometimes, but my heart is to be a nurturer. I want to be there for individuals and coach them on an individual level. Pete Carroll said in response to the pushback on the infamous end zone throw that lost the Seattle Seahawks Super Bowl second year, right? That was 3 years ago. People were saying, the talking heads, the armchair coaches, everybody was saying the next morning that was the worst call ever. And he turned to his team and he said it wasn't the worst call ever. It was the worst outcome ever. Brilliant. Brilliant, changes everything. Angela Duckworth, who is probably trying to coach people in her book Grit to become glorious bastards. And if you look at the philosophy that undergirds her teaching, she's probably trying to coach people to become glorious bastards in how they lead. And those would be people like Donald Trump, Steve Jobs, people who are notorious but successful, and they're winning. He's the president of the United States. Take that, Hillary. You know what I mean? But he's a total bastard, maybe, in the way that he treats people and how he lives his life and what he says on tweets. That could be a way that you would approach it. But you can't deny the fact that he's winning. He's winning in categories that a lot of people consider very important. So if you want to win, you go work for him, or you buy one of his hotels, and you put his name on the hotel. That's a way to succeed. It's not my way. It may not be your way, but it's a way to succeed. And so the point is, we're talking about positional leadership. You can be an extremely successful leader in a position or without a position, according to one philosophy or another. You can be Pete Carroll or you can be Coach K, right? You can be an extremely successful leader and look very different from somebody else who's also an extremely successful leader. There are some CEOs who are like Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, like billionaire philanthropist playboys, right? If you remember the second Avengers scene. Anyway. Every one of them. Oh, no, I've seen every one of them. The point is, you can be that, you can be flamboyant, you can drive the Lamborghini, you can be all out there, or you can be all private like Bob Chapman, who you've never heard of. Why? Because he's not like that. He's behind the scenes, but he's built a multi-million-dollar organization where what he primarily is concerned about are the people that he's leading in his business. He doesn't care about the news. He doesn't care about whatever. I only found him because he did some offbeat TEDx teaching about leadership. And I was like, I wonder what that's all about. And I was like, who's Bob Chapman? Who gives a crap? You know who knows? The people that work for him. Because they think of him like a father or a grandfather. They love him and he loves them. And there's this nurturing environment that he's created. It doesn't matter to him whether he's got the Lamborghini. He could probably afford it. He didn't want it anyway. You see what I'm saying? So you just pick your lane, but you can lead well in any context. Somebody raised their hand or had a thought.
I was just wondering what his organization was.
I knew you were going to ask, and I wish I'd known. I don't even remember. It's like a trade, a business or whatever. Bob Chapman's his name. If you do TEDx, Bob Chapman, you'll find it. It is like he sells like machinery or something. I don't know what he does. It's like some business, but real successful. Okay, attributes of a leader. So there's position, and then there's attributes. We talked briefly about Beamer having vulnerability, which inspires trust. We talked about her gratitude, her smile. We talked about, what else did we talk about, Beamer? Attributes. Humility, integrity, whatever, all that. I would say, let me add to that. There's just a list you can write down and consider, and then compare yourself to this list. Thick skin, ability to confront, ability to make decisions, clear communication, integrity, empathy, confidence, trustworthiness, aptitude, competence. I mean, you can just generate your own list, keep going. Think about the person that you have loved the most as an influencer in your life and start trying to describe them. What are the attributes of a leader? Endless. Because they're all different. Effective leaders are all different. Can you be an effective leader and get hurt and offended easily? Yep. You know, thick skin is a great advantage because in a leadership role, you're constantly in situations where you have to deal with tension. But if you're a high empathy, high emotion, high relationship, high feeler kind of person, and you're in a leadership role, it doesn't mean that you can't win. It means you have to be self-aware. So where you may lose on having thin skin, you're going to have to win in some other category. You're going to have to make up for it in relational strength or gift or communication or something, right? You're going to have to balance it out. So there are attributes of what make a great leader. Moving on, there are circumstances that shift and change how you have to lead. So leading somebody who is winning is very, 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 very different than leading somebody who is failing. And the problem is that might be the same person in different seasons, right? So here, let me bring it real, like real present. If I am a leader, which I think I am, I think I lead you guys well. I think I influence and lead on our staff. But if I'm a leader, leading you guys before we entered into this kind of swirling, everyone is fighting for a role and some people are getting positions and some people aren't. It looks very different today than what it looked like a month ago when you were fully committed and there was no to the program and there was no kind of question mark hanging over it, right? Why is it different? Because leading somebody who is winning looks very different from leading somebody who is failing. Leading somebody who, leading people through change is very different from leading people in a stable kind of equilibrium. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so who I am as a leader has to shift according to the circumstances that are required of me. Who can speak to that from personal experience? What is required of me as a leader has to shift based on changing circumstances. And sometimes that's a moment-by-moment decision. Oh, you're crying now. I have to become a different kind of leader for you right now. I can't be the same kind of leader in this context and expect the same results.
I have an example. It's not necessarily mine, but it's something that I've observed recently. If that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So Tori, guest experience. She's guest experience with Blakey. And recently we had the news that our midweek won't be continuing. It'll be ending in the month of May. And so the way that she had to communicate that to her leaders was being really empathetic, sympathizing with like their disappointment, and also like she wanted to like kind of corral them and challenge them to like, hey, like, look, there's Sundays we're going to invest into that, and there's talks of like another experience opening up. So she had to like switch on a dime from like giving really hard news during a rally to all of a sudden inspiring them to, but be here in this moment, be here on this Wednesday, ready for somebody who's going to come in and like get saved today. And like she did that really well. Like Joel, like that whole team really did that.
Do you remember how she did it?
I remember Joel giving the overarching thing to everything, and Tori like coming in to her team specifically and like laying that out.
See if you can pull up the words from the script that she used for us right now.
She talked about how, like, as a church, we pursue excellence and we want each experience to be something that is a good example of like what we're for. And she continued to say that, like, in this season, we're going to step back and like reassess like where we're at with our experiences and what we're offering for people that might be coming for the first time. Like, she really did not make it that like they were failing or that the teams had done anything that was like, it was just a decision that was out of their control. And she still owned that, saying like, hey, but like, this is what we are doing. She gave like really clear example. The whole team did like, just to say like, hey, this is happening, but it's not the end. Like, it's really a comma because we're doing this. And this is
That's great. I like that idea of the comma. Yeah, I'm just curious because, you know, there'd be 10,000 ways to do that well. 10,000 ways to approach a group of people that is going to have to experience a pretty significant change. And understanding who they are and where they're coming from and what they might be feeling in that moment, and then directly addressing that issue. You can do 10,000 different ways. You know, so if you feel that she did a good job with it, then that's great. What she's going to be looking at, Joel's going to be looking at, and for your part that you're going to be looking at is what happens 6 months from now. You know, because you have to continually reevaluate. Did the shift introduce something into the culture that we're now going to have to address and continually kind of work out, right? Because it's just always changing. It's always shifting. So circumstances, the circumstances of leadership are a consideration when it comes to how you lead. There are tensions in leadership. Okay, so this is the Leif Babin and Jocko Willink versus Bill Hybels tension. They're approaching the scenarios from different perspectives. Both are selling books. Okay, when you write a book, you have to pick a thesis and you have to convince everybody from the title to the last paragraph. You have to convince everybody that your thesis is the thing that they desperately need. Well, you can't do that without exaggeration. You can't do that without hyperfocus. You can't do that without denying a bunch. You're writing a book and you're trying to sell said book, so you have to hyperfocus. The same way that you over-dramatize certain details when you're making a video, or you accentuate certain colors when you're designing a graphic, or you emphasize certain words when you're coaching somebody in a leadership conversation. You have to overstate the thing. So there are tensions in leadership. So there's the this versus that, right, in leadership. We fail as leaders when we focus on the verse. That's where we fail. When there are tensions that you're having to navigate, you got to choose sides, and you have to lead people confidently according to a particular side, right? You can't get stuck in the middle because nobody wants to follow somebody who's divided and undecided. Abraham Lincoln was famous for quoting the scripture, which said, "A house divided against itself can't stand." That is a man who is leading, taking charge in an environment where the country was divided on racial issues, and saying, we cannot remain divided and continue to move forward. We will fall, right? You didn't have to. There's 150 years of slavery before Abraham Lincoln came along, and the country was growing and thriving. You know, somebody else could have come in and chosen the other side. But Abraham Lincoln didn't. Praise God, he didn't. But he chose a side, and he dug his heels in, and people can follow that kind of decisiveness. So there are tensions, but you can't allow the tensions to get you all torn apart. So here's some tensions that you're going to face. Getting crap done versus developing people. Those two things kind of have a hard time living together sometimes. So what do I do right now? Do I ignore what you need and how you feel and how long you've been up at it already in order to accomplish the task that really needs to be done because guests are coming? Or do I pause and say, you know what? Even if it fails, this is a moment that I have to give you attention rather than the thing that needs to be done. You're never going to win. It will always be a tension. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a tension. Oh, what were you going to say? I thought somebody was going to say something. I feel myself getting into this. I'm on my soapbox and I'm about to grab your neck and just start shaking like a kid. So if you have something to say, but you're going to have to fight for it because yeah.
I was going to say something. I think that's a tension that I faced for six years I worked in America. What was my first priority going to be? And I got to the sense for my fourth year that it's always going to be the people first because that's what's going to move the business forward. And yeah, some things were not going to get done. I was going to lose my aspect, but my people are always going to know that I'm for them and will always be for them, despite the fact that, yeah, I mean, I have to do something.
And you made that choice, and you succeeded in your role, and then you left that role and came to ministry.
Yes.
Makes sense to me. Seems logical, right? I mean, it seems logical, and you're going to have to decide for yourself the kind of person that you want to be. You will always have to sacrifice people to get crap done sometimes. But if you weigh it out in the end, you're deciding whether you're an iconoclast or a nurturer as a leader, right? or a glorious bastard or a nurturer as a leader. That's what you're deciding. And you can be successful both ways. You can win on the side of getting crap done and be promoted as a leader and succeed and win as a leader. And people will look up to you and respect you. They may just choose to go to somebody else when they're hurting, right? You can do that though. It's a tension that you have to choose how to navigate. There are other tensions. Getting credit for my work versus giving credit to others for their contribution. Why is that a tension? Shouldn't I always give credit to other people, right? If you always give credit to other people, then guess who ultimately gets promoted? The other people. If nobody ever knows that you're awesome because you're always deferring everything, well, it wasn't me, actually, it was Bobby. I mean, if it weren't for Bobby on my team, I'd suck, you know? I mean, I'm the worst. Bobby's amazing, but I'm just terrible, you know? Okay, well, so what's going to happen now is that we're actually going to put Bobby in 40, and you're going to report to him. That makes sense because Bobby's great, you know? It's a tension. You have to navigate the reality of you have to have the right perception about you as an influencer, as a leader. You have to make sure people understand the value that you bring, and you have to make sure that your team doesn't feel like you're selfish and stealing credit all the time, right? It's a tension that you have to navigate. You have to do both well. Yeah.
The question I have for a little while, but do you think balance is tension? Meaning, do you think that there is like a point of singularity where you're winning in both areas?
Yes.
Where's the tension, like sometimes I'm coming pulled over here and sometimes there's never really like one perfect place where I'm like balancing.
I think balance is a word that is unhelpful when it comes to these types of conversations. So whether that's spirituality, relationships, work-life balance, calendaring, that kind of thing. I think balance becomes an unhelpful word. Tension becomes a nice replacement for balance, because a balance, think image or mental models. A balance in the science classroom, you know what that is? It's got the little metal plates on both sides, and you get the little sliding things, and you put a beaker of whatever on this side, and you put a 1 kilogram lead thing on this side, fill the beaker with water. If you're thinking balance, then in order to get a balance to weigh itself out, right? In order to determine anything from a balance, you have to have one thing pitted against another. So if you try to put the idea or the imagery of the word balance into a relationship, you can never achieve balance in a marriage, which is why Emerson Eggerichs in Love and Respect said that you can be right at the top of your lungs and still be wrong in a marriage. Because it's not about balance. It's not about, well, you know, you did the dishes last night, I'll do the dishes tonight. No, if I have to do the dishes every night the rest of my life, my priority here is that we have a healthy relationship. That's my priority. I don't give a crap about the balance of time and scheduling. I want my wife to be happy, period. When she's happy, I'm happy, you know, and fulfilled and all of those things. You see what I'm saying? It's not about balance anymore. Balance doesn't, but tension helps. Tension helps a lot. Think about the image of tension. I gave you that idea of a tight wire going over a cliff, right? In order to have tension, you have to have anchor points. So still the same idea is that you're trying to get from one side of the cliff to the other, but if you have to navigate something, then tension can help you get there. Tension can help you get there in communication. Tension can help you get there in art, right? The tension. So I've got these old antique looking legs in the upstairs of my barn, and I've got this old antique looking tabletop upstairs in my barn. And they're both there, and actually they belong together, but for some reason when I moved into my house, they were separated. So I've got these antique legs, and I've got the antique table and a tabletop, and I'm like, why are they not together? I don't know. Well, I walked by Consignment First the other day, and they had antique looking legs that they painted white and a cool modern looking tabletop on top, and they were selling it for $120. And I thought, I have an antique table top and I have antique legs. So if I get modern legs under the antique tabletop and I got a modern tabletop over the antique legs, I now have $240 sitting in my upstairs. If I put them together, nobody wants them. They left them behind when they sold the house and moved, because the two things together, they're not working. It's a tension, right? So you create this tension in design when you combine antique with modern. You see what I'm saying? having a house that all looks kind of old and run down without, with distressed wood and just kind of unkempt and not put together, that doesn't look good. But having a modern house that's freshly painted white with clean lines, where you have an old barn beam against the raw brick over your fireplace right now, that's really fashionable because there's a tension that's created in the old and new. You see what I'm saying? So tensions are extremely valuable. And I think what we're trying to create or own, I think, is that there are tensions in leadership. There's tensions. And so if you just pretend like they don't exist and you're like, no, leadership's about getting crap done. Well, you steal a lot of the power of actually understanding that in each moment requires discernment, right? There's a tension right now between getting all of these people organized and making it all happen and being the kind of leader who builds a reputation for the long term. And that tension is present in every moment. Can I move forward?
Yeah.
All right. Did I even get close to answering anything you were saying?
I think that for me, there's just like this natural desire, like when I hear about tension, I'm like, I have to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't fix the tension. But when I think about finding that point of singularity, I'm like, okay, so it's like the goal really to find that balance, like the point where it's like you're living in both, or is it more about like the journey of like going from one side of the tension to the other?
I think it's actually, yes, the second one was closer, but I would say it a little bit more directly. I would say, I think it's actually about being okay that you will never be able to live in both. I think it's actually about accepting the fact that you really can't win.
Yeah.
There's going to be a tension between getting crap done and loving people well, and you cannot win. That will always be a tension. So you're going to fail some days, and you're going to win others, right? You're going to make the right choice today and the wrong one tomorrow. It's a tension, right? So just owning that it's a tension and acknowledging that it's there and adjusting how you live and work according to the needs of the moment, that is success. That make sense?
Yeah. Would you say it's kind of more of this is kind of an experience. The more you are in it, the more you see it, the more you know how to react to the situations.
Yeah.
It's like you can learn it, you can look at it, it's hard to really figure out until you just do it more and more.
Yeah. Which is why, I don't know if any of you have ever noticed this, but sometimes when you're having a one-on-one with me and you share something that's like a real struggle, you might notice sometimes that I start smiling.
Yeah.
And you're like, why are you smiling right now? And it's because if you're trying to get from this side of the cliff to that one, and there's a big chasm, God has just blessed you with a tension that's going to get you there. You see what I'm saying? Like that struggle is what's going to give you the courage and the strength to take the risk to walk over that tightrope to get to the other side. That's it. So I smile because the thing that really fuels me is helping people progress. That's what fuels me. And if I ever lost the opportunity to be in those conversations or at that level of impact with people, I couldn't do it. I wouldn't have the motivation to show up daily and do what I do. I wouldn't be able to. I have to feel like I'm helping you progress as a person, as a leader. I feel like that's the way that God designed me. See what I'm saying? So you show up and you sit down and you're like, oh gosh, everything is falling apart. It's the worst. And I'm like, this is going to be great. We're going to be able to get somewhere today and it's not easy, but it's fulfilling in a sense. So I think you're right. I didn't smile 7 years ago when someone came to me and said, hey, I've got this problem, because that problem felt to me like, oh shoot, my reputation's on the line, right? If I don't fix them and they go off and screw something up, all of a sudden that's my fault. Oh no. Because I was an immature leader in that way 7 years ago. As I've continued to gain experience, I've learned that, those tensions are actually the only way that I can help you get where you really need to go. If everything is hunky-dory and everyone's happy and there's no problems, it's like, why would you move? Why would you move anywhere? You're in a good spot. You don't need to go anywhere. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if that helped you or answered. Okay, let's keep going on these tensions. Maybe we won't talk about all of them, but take the blame for your team's mistakes versus provide accurate information to diagnose issues. So it's almost the opposite of the credit. But sometimes if you're the leader and you're being held to a high standard, held to account in a meeting, and somebody's like, well, whose fault was it? There's an extreme ownership way of responding to that question, which is it's 100% my fault. And at a certain level, that should always be your response as a leader. Always. It should always be your response. But if you're 100% to blame all the time for everything, well, then you're ultimately going to lose the opportunity to continue to be in that position of influence. See what I'm saying? It is my fault because I didn't clearly communicate. I set this expectation, and I don't think it was as clear as it should have been. I empowered this person who was leading, and they weren't executing at the level of the expectation that I established for them. And despite my efforts to train them, they didn't pick it up. And then I allowed these details to fall, and it is my fault. But I'm not saying it's my fault like I did everything wrong. I'm saying it's my fault in the sense of I'm owning the outcome as a leader. But I also have to point to the responsibility of each individual in the part, right? So if you've got a volunteer that you've empowered and they're not succeeding, and you've addressed it and you've supported them and you've narrowed the scope and they're still not succeeding, at some point you have to remove them. At some point, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to consider the other side of the tension, which is provide accurate information to diagnose issues. It's actually you. I'm sorry, it's you. You're not built for this role. And we've been trying for 6 months now, and it's only producing frustration for you and us. You're the one that needs to be removed right now. Thank you. Praise God. I've been trying to get out of this role for months. You know, the pressure has been killing me. My family's falling apart. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to address it sometimes. It's attention. Lead people according to their needs versus get them to work according to your needs. It's attention. I need people to affirm me regularly because I am an insecure leader. That's not me. I'm saying, and hypothetically, although I do love affirmation, but that would have been me for sure 3 or 4 years ago, but not so much anymore. But that's a need that I have. Because of my insecurity, I need affirmation. Well, what happens if that's your driving motivation for how you construct teams, how you communicate, how you whatever? Then you're that obnoxious person who's always like, hey, don't you think that was awesome? You know? And everyone's like, yes, it was awesome. You know, it's fine. People are flexible with you. They understand you're not perfect. But if everything that you do is oriented around you getting your needs met, then you're gonna short circuit your ability to lead well, because sometimes it's about getting their needs met. And you have to sometimes sacrifice your needs for theirs. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So another example would be in my position specifically, what's going on for me personally doesn't always have a place in the conversation. What happened in the last conversation usually doesn't have a place in this one. So as we're cycling through one-on-ones, or as I'm stepping into this group meeting or whatever, whatever's happening outside of this room doesn't necessarily pertain to what's happening inside this room. So if I need to get counseling, I should schedule an appointment with Heather Dooley, in other words. That doesn't mean I get to come in here and get my needs met from you guys. Now, is there bleed over? For sure. Is there a place for vulnerability? Absolutely. But if my overarching motivation in leadership is to get my needs met, I'm really not leading. Ultimately, it's attention. Short-term wins versus long-term success. Are you going to run to the fire, or are you going to figure out who the arson was? It's both hands. It's attention. People versus systems. If all you ever do is love people and build relationships, but you never build systems, then those relationships that matter so much to you will ultimately fry on the inexhaustible treadmill that you've created in the areas that you lead. You got to do both. So sometimes you have to lock yourself away and say, no, my office is closed. The doctor is out. I'm working on a spreadsheet today. Shut up. Don't call me. You know, no matter how much you love people, sometimes you have to just work on systems, and vice versa. No matter how much you love systems as an introvert, as a designer, as a video person, sometimes you have to recognize that if I'm always at my computer and never looking around, the people that I'm going to need one day aren't going to be there for me when I call them. It's a both and. It's always attention. When to develop someone and when to fire somebody. I don't know why I'm laughing. I'm not even going to say anything. Be likable and approachable versus pursue excellence with accountability. Have I firmly at this point convinced you that leadership is not quite as simple as, oh, it's influence. Leadership is influence, you know? Yeah. Yes, it is. It's influence. But influence boils down to a lot more than just your ability to communicate clearly in an email. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You need to communicate clearly in an email. But influence also looks like, how do I affect change when I'm the new guy or the new girl at the bottom of the organization? What does that look like? You see what I'm saying? And it's very complex. So so what do you do, in other words? Because we're coming somewhere. I'm going to wrap up even a little bit early unless you have a lot of questions. But what do you do then? My assignment was to come in and try to teach you about leadership. What have we done so far? We talked to Beamer. And some of you felt like I could never be Beamer. I don't have that level of passion. I would never come back from the beach at 3 a.m., period. I wouldn't do it. Some of you felt that way. Some of you are like, I want to be Beamer. I'm a man and I'm older than her, but if I could go backwards, I would be a woman. I would be Beamer. I would get the balayage and the curls. I would do it all. And some of you are in the middle of being like, that's awesome for her, I'm different, and so it's all different types of, we talked to Beamer, and then I systematically and progressively destroyed everything there was that you learned that was a wonderful principle about leadership, and said, that's the tip of the iceberg at best, right? So we went through all of that. And why did I do all of that? Because I think the best way for you to grow is to have a realistic perspective of what you're entering into. One of the first sermons that I heard was preached by a guy who was a professor at, because remember, I didn't get saved till I was 19, so I don't have a lifetime of listening to sermons. So one of the first ones that I heard was a tape that somebody gave me, and the guy's name was, Lyle Dorsett was his friend. I don't remember. But he told an analogy or story in the sermon about how he had run a marathon. The catch was he hadn't trained for said marathon. So he was an athlete, and after his football career, like 2 months later, still in pretty good shape, was like, I'm in great shape. I played collegiate football for 4 years. I've been training my whole life. Like, I'm in great shape. I can run a marathon. So he shows up, forgot his socks. And he was like, you don't really need socks. Like, Africans run in bare feet. Like, I don't need socks. So he ran the marathon. Never run a marathon, forgot his socks. Whatever, I'll do it anyway. And then he obviously wraps the story up talking about how it took him 4 weeks to be able to walk again because the blisters were so bad. And he ended up not finishing. I think he made it like 17 miles and couldn't walk for 4 weeks. And it was hilarious. I don't know why I remember it. That's pretty memorable. But like if you're going to start the journey, and at the journey of the marathon, and you show up feeling like, I got enough experience. I don't need socks. What you're going to end up doing is hurting yourself a lot. And you're going to end up at 17 miles. You're going to be like, what happened? What did I do wrong? And I think that's how he applied the analogy. He said, I now know that if you're going to run a marathon, you need to train for it, right? I think that's how he turned it. What's that guy's name? I told a couple that I was doing marriage counseling for 5-6 years ago. They were living together. And I was learning as a leader that I can't control people. So rather than saying, I'm not going to do your wedding unless you move out, I was trying to figure out, how do I influence this couple to do what I want them to do, slyly, without telling them what to do and making an ultimatum to where they have to do it, or go find your own pastor to marry you, whatever. And so I was trying that, and what I tried to say on the phone, I probably told you this story. If I did, I'm sorry, but I said, if you were going to run a marathon, the guy was a real athletic dude or whatever. So I was talking to him, and I was like, if you're going to run a marathon, and it's this Saturday, and you're flying back from Seattle or Toronto or wherever you're coming from, you're not going to take a red eye and fly overnight and not get sleep and then show up at the starting line of the marathon and expect yourself to be able to perform well, right? And he was like, exactly. I wouldn't do that. And I was like, well, Saul, you're the man. What is this bleating of sheep that I hear? And I said, you're about to start a marriage, which is a relational marathon, and you're taking a red-eye flight and showing up with no sleep at 6 a.m. at the starting line. Why are you living with her? You got 6 weeks, and you're enmeshed with finances, and you're enmeshed relationally, you're enmeshed physically before you've made a commitment. And that's like showing up exhausted at the starting line of a marathon. I was like, give yourself space, give yourself as much rest and as much time as you can. And, you know, I felt that was like pretty compelling, right? They didn't. They lived together. I did their wedding, you know, and 7 years later, they're still married. They got a couple kids. They seem happy, right? Maybe I was wrong. But here's my hope. My hope is I still believe to this day that it wasn't ideal. And I've not been in every moment of their relationship, but I still think that there were arguments and tensions that they faced in their marriage, especially in the first 2 or 3 years, that they would have navigated differently had they done it differently, right? I had another couple that I was coaching in Toronto who were not just living together. They've been living together 4 years. She had 2 kids. Their finances were all mixed together. He was actually out of a job, so he was dependent upon her. And they came to me because they were fighting over the timing of when they were going to have their first baby together. Not married. Did I say that? Not married. And I was like, wow. But I learned a lot since the marathon analogy. And so here's what I said instead. I said, listen, y'all just like showed up in my office and it's as if you've like stabbed each other 17 different times and you're bleeding out. And I can't stop the bleeding. I'm not a doctor. So you're screwed. So here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to pretend like everything is going well and you're both healthy and that you're 19 and you're engaged and you're considering starting your relationship. And I'm going to talk to you about the ideal of what I believe God teaches for a healthy marriage. And then y'all are going to have to go on your way to the emergency room here in a few minutes. You're going to have to take these principles and figure out how do I apply it in our context? Because y'all have a mess and I can't undo it. I'm not going to tell you to move out now that your 2 kids basically see him as a father because you've been living together so long. I'm not going to hurt the kids that are involved because you didn't do this well. But I'm going to teach you what I believe is right. And then you're going to have to figure out how to apply it because it's going to be messy. You know, so are you okay? What that means is sometimes I'm going to have to say things confidently and directly that are going to go in the exact opposite direction of what you've chosen to do. And it's going to feel like I'm slapping you in the face. I'm not. I just don't know what else to do. I can't speak to, you know what I'm saying? And I did that. And they love us. They specifically love me. Like they'll text me every once in a while and they'll just be like, oh man, we miss you guys. And it's like, I've been gone from Canada for 4 years. You don't even go to the church anymore. But something about what I chose to do in that moment, embracing the messiness and complexity of working with people, made a connection for them. You know, they said one day we're going to get married. And when that happens, you're our pastor. We're going to have you come up and do that. And I'm like, there would be almost nothing that would make me feel more joyful than having the opportunity to do that, right? And I don't agree with anything that they're doing in their lives. I don't, but when she showed up, they both did. They showed up to help us move when we were coming back from Canada, and she was wearing a Playboy hat. I was like, my kids are here, you know, like, I'm just saying, like, could you have picked a different hat, you know? And she was like, well, Pastor John, you know, we had a life before you came here, whatever. So, okay, can you pick up that box? So here's it. What do you do with all this? Because I've made a mess of all of this, I think. Leadership influence, for sure. What do you leave here and work on? You know, you got 5 minutes, I'm going to release you. What do you do in 5 minutes? What do you go work on? What I think you have to work on is what you heard Beamer talking about, is when she got emotional. Did you feel that? Yeah. She got all choked up. Choked up. What was she talking about when she got all choked up? Her kids, right? Now put that in the context of leadership. She was talking about people that she had given herself to, that she was leading, that she is now grieving the loss of. So I'm saying? You agree with that? You see it? That's what you have to go work on. You have to go work on your willingness to throw yourself in, to invest yourself fully, to give yourself away, knowing that there's going to come a point where it's going to be done. You're going to have to move on. You're going to be given a different opportunity. You see what I'm saying? You have to work on becoming the kind of person who's going to get a text in 2 years that says Happy Mother's Day from a kid that you worked with, and feel the emotion of, I can't be there for you anymore because I have a new assignment and I'm struggling to be passionate about my new assignment. And so this is both as enriching and fulfilling as could ever possibly be, and a reminder of my loss. You see what I'm saying? That's what you have to go work on. You have to go work on you. You have to go work on you as a person. And I think a word that will summarize that you can think about, so if you're going to put a diary entry in your journal and you want to label what am I working on when it comes to leadership, I think the word is actually trust. That's the word that you're working on. It's you being willing to become the person who extends trust, and it's you being the kind of person who is trustworthy. That's what you go work on. So I'm currently reading, if you want a book to put on your assignment, I'm currently reading The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey, the son. So if you read 7 Habits, which I am only saying it conditionally because I know that some of you probably didn't give it a thorough read. But if you remember the story about Green and Clean, where he had his son go out to the yard and he said, I want you to take care of this yard. Here's the only assignment. It needs to be green and it needs to be clean. And then the kid failed for 5 days and didn't do anything and sat on the couch, and there was trash in the yard from a picnic that they'd had. And so Stephen Covey walked him around the yard. That was the other qualification. I'm going to walk you around. We're going to look at this. And he said, why is there trash everywhere? You know, how come the grass isn't mowed? Why is this grass brown? Look at our neighbor's yard. That's green and clean. What's different from their yard and our yard? Well, and the son said, well, it's just too hard. It's just too hard. And he said, what's hard? You haven't gotten off the couch. You haven't done anything. Why is it hard? It's not hard to do nothing. And he said, well, I can't do it all by myself. And he said, well, I told you if you need help, you could ask for it. You've not asked for help. You've not even done that. Do you need help? Yes, I need help. And so they walked around and picked up the trash and whatever. And the son describes it. He's the one who wrote this book. The son describes it, that what happened for me in that moment is I realized the power of trust. My dad had given me trust that I was going to be able to take care of the yard and make it both green and clean. And when I violated his trust, he held me accountable. But after that, he continued to extend trust to me. So as a 9-year-old, I never had to ask for help again. That yard was green and clean. You know, it was mine. I owned it. And what he then goes on to write about in The Speed of Trust is how the thing that we're often lacking is not the soft byproduct of trust in the way that we lead, but the active application of trust in how we lead. Say it again. So we think of trust as, if I lead well and accomplish the results, then the people that I'm leading will ultimately trust me, and the people that I'm reporting to will ultimately see me as trustworthy. It's the exact backwards. If you earn the trust, then people will do what they need to do exponentially faster and better at a higher level of ownership. And if you become trustworthy, people will go and do for you what needs to be done. You see what I'm saying? It's the opposite. Trust is not passive. He keeps saying it's active. And so what you need to develop in yourself is trust, the ability to become trustworthy and the ability to extend trust. 2 categories that I want you to consider as you're digging down into this area of trust in your own leadership and in your own life is that it's both character and competence. And go read the book because you'll get a lot more out of the book. But character and competence. So being a person of integrity who loves the kids enough to drive back at 3 a.m., being a person of humility who is willing to embrace the season that you're in, and I could point to a lot of you guys as well, but I'm using Beamer as an example. Those are all character issues. You can't be a person who is different privately than publicly and expect that long term you're going to be able to win. We're going to find out. We're going to know. We're going to know, or we're going to feel it. It's going to affect you. You can't do it. You can't outrun your lack of character. Make sense? So if you have had failings in the area of your character, then you have to rebuild through vulnerability, through getting help, through humility, through honesty, through transparency, through getting the right people around you. You have to ultimately rebuild. That's rebuilding your reputation. So if you failed in character, it doesn't mean you're out. It just means you have to focus on that and repair whatever is lost. Okay? The other side of it, though, is competence. Just because I would trust you with my life or trust you with my kids, let's say, just because I would trust you with my kids doesn't mean I would trust you to do open heart surgery on me. That depends on your training and your competence. If you have been a preschool teacher for 3 decades and you are amazing with kids and I would trust you with my kids, that doesn't mean you know how to cut open my thorax and, cut on my arteries. Are you with me? Yeah. Competence matters. And so if you have great character but still don't earn the spot, then it could be a competence thing. And you have to now develop the skills and the competence in the areas that you're interested in being trusted. So it's both and. Those things go together. And if you can develop a greater depth of trustworthiness, you will ultimately end up with higher degrees of influence and leadership. Fair?
Yes.
Any thoughts? This is an excerpt from a book, and I don't even have here who read it. But let me read this to you, and then I'll pray and we'll be done. If you boil relationships down to the most important element, it's always going to be trust. Not leadership, not value, partnership, or anything else. If you don't have trust, your relationship is in trouble. In his book, On Becoming a Leader, Warren Bennis says integrity is the basis of trust, which is not so much an ingredient of leadership as it is a product. It is the one quality that cannot be acquired but must be earned. It is given by coworkers and followers, and without it, the leader can't function. That can be said not only of leaders and followers, but also of all relationships. Developing trust is like constructing a building. It takes time. It must be done one piece at a time. As in construction, it's much quicker and easier to tear something down than it is to build it up. But if the foundation is strong, there is a good chance that what is built upon it will stand. When 2 people trust each other completely, the relationship can grow to a level of friendship that is as rewarding as anything in life. It reaches the highest heights. Writer and chaplain to Queen Victoria, Charles Kingsley, said, "A blessed thing it is for any man or woman to have a friend, one human soul whom we can trust utterly, who knows the best and worst of us and who loves us in spite of all of our faults." Make sense? So go with inspiration and do what you need to do. Father, we're grateful for today. Thank you for Beamer. Thank you for her transparency and her vulnerability and willingness to come in here and open herself up so that we can see a reflection of the struggle that we experience in someone else. And on one hand, know that we're not alone, and on another, be inspired that we can keep going and we can do it. Thank you for this group and for their humility and willingness to sit for an hour and 48 minutes, 53 minutes, and listen and take notes and ask questions and engage. I pray, God, that you would multiply back to them exponentially the time that they've invested today in the areas that they have been given authority and in the areas that they have influence. Pray that you would multiply back this time exponentially and reward them for their diligence to open up and be a part. And God, we thank you for this season that you have us in. The tension of it is helping us grow and making us better. May we arrive on the other side of this cliff, better people for the tension that we've navigated in. We love you, Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen. Yeah. Anyone going to miss lunch? Need a Snickers? Maybe you have to split them. There's not enough to all I'm going to keep one.